In this week's drive, we ride a bucking Bronco all the way into the wall, play NASCAR tag at 180 miles an hour, join Max as he celebrates his 33rd birthday, and head up a famous hill in some very special cars. All this and more in this week's Drive. The onset of rain threatened to make the German touring car race at the Norris Ring into a skating competition, so most cars came to the grid on rain tyres. AMG Mercedes driver Jean Alesi began on pole, but lost out to Dutch driver Christian Albers, who started third but took the lead on the first corner. Further back in the field, there was trouble for Germany's Heinz-Harald Frentzen on lap 5. The ex-Formula One driver outbraked himself and took out his Opel teammate Marcel Fassler. 4 laps later, Albers lost the lead when he lost valuable seconds after stalling his car after a routine pit stop. But he wasn't the only one to have pit stop problems. On lap 13, the new leader, Matthias Ekstrom, also stalled his Audi, but got going again within seconds. Timo Scheider lasted only 22 laps before he retired his Opel from the race. Albers' pit problems allowed his teammate Gary Paffett to take the lead. By lap 44, he was leading Christian Abt's Audi ahead of Albers with Alesi fourth. Opel were having a bad day. On lap 62, Peter Dumbreck touched the wall but was able to keep going. Then, with 8 laps remaining, disaster struck for ex-Formula One driver Jean Alesi. He locked up his front brakes, couldn't steer, and ended up in the tyre wall. Getting started and back out on the track cost him several places, and eventually he had to settle for 10th place. No such problems for Paffett, though, who held on to take the race 1.9 seconds ahead of teammate Albers, with Bernd Schneider giving Mercedes-Benz a clean sweep of the podium by coming third.
Yeah, the race wasn't easy for sure. It was a really hard race, a really long race, and it took a lot out of me. You know, it was tough, but yeah, I mean, you know, it's a perfect position. We've got no problems this time at all.
Paffett was disqualified from the previous race after running out of fuel. Over the Atlantic, the Portland race was the 4th round of the Champ Car Series. During the 94-lap, 186-mile race, drivers had to deal with very high temperatures and, as a result, often slick track conditions. The race got off to a bad start when Michel Jourdain Jr. was bumped by Mario Dominguez and went into the gravel between the first and second turns on the opening lap, bringing out the yellow flag. After that incident was cleared and the green flag was given after 4 laps, Dominguez spun on cold tyres, bringing out a second yellow. He clipped Rodolfo Levine and the day was over for both drivers. This is the view from inside the driver's helmet. In fact, these 2 incidents would be the only caution periods of the race. The 2 drivers retired on lap 71. Only the top 6 would complete the full 94 laps. Bruno Junqueira was 2.9 seconds behind Sébastien Bourdais with 3 laps left, but he couldn't catch his French teammate. Bourdais, with an average speed of 104.9 miles an hour, lost the lead only briefly when he went into the pits. Junqueira came second, with Paul Tracy finishing third. Bourdais, who was last year's Rookie of the Year, won earlier this year at Monterrey in Mexico, but he was thwarted 2 weeks ago in Milwaukee when he crashed out early on. Meanwhile, the stock cars were at the DHL 400 for the 15th race of the season on the fast 2-mile oval southwest of Motown, Detroit, Michigan. For once, the race did not get off to a clean start. Seconds after the green flag flew, the number 6 car of Mark Martin slowed suddenly and he moved down to the track's inner apron to get out of the way as following cars scrambled to get around him.
Boy, that spread the field out behind him. They are 3 wide, exiting turn 2.
Just seconds after that, Robbie Gordon spun on the wide, high-banked track. Thanks to the space on the extra-wide track, he was able to get the car pointed in the right direction and resume racing. Brendan Gowen appeared to have a problem with the throttle, and that's when Gordon tapped him and spun out on the first lap of the race.
Oh, something happened to Brendan.
Sound like Brendan had to get completely out of the throttle.
You get tight off that corner over there. You had to lift out of the gas a little bit. Man, I can't tell. That is, from a driver, Robbie Gordon, unexpected.
Brendan has leader Jeff Gordon.
Former champion Jeff Gordon, who'd started from pole position, was leading when white smoke billowed out of his car. Gordon led for 81 laps when his engine broke, the third time this season. Gordon has had 2 previous wins on this track. With just 8 laps remaining, Tony Stewart in car number 20 tangled with Greg Biffle. Both cars spun, although both were able to continue. Even so, officials decided to put the race under a yellow caution flag.
Caution is out.
Ryan Newman was able to avoid every crash and come away with his 10th career win, and his first since October last year. He had to overcome radiator problems early in the race, which forced him into the pits on the 22nd of 200 laps.
Darn it. You race to the checkered flag.
Newman regained the lead midway through the race, passing Dale Jarrett and holding off rookie Casey Kane, who claimed his 4th second-place finish of the year. Jimmy Johnson finished 4th to move 7 points ahead of Dale Earnhardt in the title. The accident-plagued SunTrust IndyCar event saw light drizzle in the first half of the race, which helped Alex Barron out after only 7 laps. Despite the conditions, only 4 drivers crashed out. Rookie Mark Taylor was one. He started 3rd after a surprisingly fast qualifying run, but crashed on lap 222. Dan Weldon took advantage of a crash on lap 187 when Sam Hornish clipped Thomas Schechter's front wheel. Weldon drove the final 121 laps without refueling to win, while Helio Castroneves pitted and then turned a 168-mile-an-hour lap near the end to take a close second place. Bernie Ecclestone, the man in charge of Formula One, has spoken about his views for the future of the sport and what he wants it to be.
What has always been spectacular and interesting for the, for viewers, for TV viewers and the public.
Where do you see it being, say, in about 5 or 10 years' time?
Well, we've been changing the Formula One is that really in the end revolves around technical regulations and sporting regulations, which we change all the time anyway. So we're looking into how we can do that, how we can change the technical regulations. Maybe, the costs have gone a little bit out of hand, unnecessarily, to be honest with you. So we need to sort of rein that in, which we're going to do.
Are there other things that you're trying to put back into Formula One?
Well, some of the technical regulations have caused problems, if you like, with the sporting regulations, because the cars aren't running as much and as long as they should be because of this one-engine formula. So we're changing that so we give better value to the public.
This year has seen Formula One staged in the Middle East at a brand new circuit in Bahrain. The first time that the Middle East has hosted a round since the Tripoli Grand Prix was held in the 1950s. And later this year, Formula One goes to a brand new track in Shanghai in China for the first time.
Do you see the focus of Formula One changing in the future as far as where it is in the world? Thinking of perhaps a movement away from Europe?
Well, I mean, we're a world championship, so when the opportunity to arises for us to be able to be in different parts of the world, we'll take it.
You began as a team boss. Do you miss that competitive cut and thrust with other team managers?
I've got even more now.
So why did you make the move away from managing to a team to managing the whole show?
We gradually, grew and grew and grew, and it needed someone to look after the show rather than I had to give the team up. It was a pity, but that's how it is.
But unhappiness with the way that Formula One is developing prompted a consortium of car manufacturers, including Mercedes, Ford, Fiat and BMW, to threaten to launch their own World Championship in competition with the Formula One series. After a reconciliation between Ecclestone and the group last year, rumours of a rival series have surfaced again recently. But Ecclestone discounted suggestions that the series will become a reality.
Oh, you mean...
by the car manufacturers,
I don't imagine that's going to happen, to be honest with you. I've never thought it would. There's no need for it. And I think they appreciate that, so I think we can discount that.
He was even more dismissive of a new racing series planned for the Middle East and other countries next year. The A1 GP series is a one-make series based in Dubai and made up of national teams racing to win for their country.
Formula 3000, which we've had, which I introduced, I think, 20 years ago, which is running, which is a single-make formula. So the A1 is even not quite as sophisticated as that. So it's more a gentleman's sort of sporting thing. No, the answer to your question is no.
It's outside of your season anyway. Do you think?
Yeah, but it's nothing. Let's wait and see what happens, shall we?
Ferrari has become the team to beat. Does Formula One need a more level playing field?
No, we get the teams independently. I mean, this is the one thing about us. You get, rewarded on your results. So people do the best job, they get the best reward. So whether it's Ferrari or McLaren or Williams or whoever it is, that's how it is.
Formula One was the first global sport on the back of mass television coverage, but it risks losing its following and its commercial appeal. Over 30,000 Speedway fans crammed into Copenhagen's Parken Stadium for the Danish Grand Prix, round 5 of Speedway's World Championship. An eventful night's action saw many of the 25 rounds rerun as rider after rider crashed out of their 4-lap heats. But none of the incidents proved more crucial than that of Britain's Lee Richardson, who was well set in second place in the first semi-final when he found much more traction than he needed with the finish line in sight. Sweden's Andreas Jonsson was lucky to avoid Richardson's machine and took the place in the final instead. It would have only been Richardson's third final appearance, but current world champion and local hero Nicky Pedersen went out in almost exactly the same way in the final itself, the first time he's got that far all season. If there were any neutral fans in the crowd, they might have seen Pedersen's departure as poetic justice. The Dane had earlier in the evening been involved in an ugly tirade against event referee Tony Steele. The rerun final turned out to be something of a procession for Australia's Jason Crump, who had looked sluggish in the earlier rounds but won his semi with ease and dismissed the challenge of American Greg Hancock and Sweden's Andreas Jonsson just as easily. 28-year-old Crump duly came home to win his second Grand Prix of the season and the 10th of his career fairly easily after the tightly fought earlier rounds. The Australian is the first rider to win 2 Grand Prix this year, and he also successfully defended the Danish title he won at the same stadium last year. Crump also jumped to the top of the championship standings. With Lee Adams having a poor night and being eliminated in the second semi-final, Jason now has a lead of 14 points over his compatriot and 19 more than Hancock, who was also looking for his second win of the year. For Jonsson, it was his first podium finish, and the Swede moves up to 7th on the ladder. The Speedway World Championship now takes a 6-week break until the 6th round takes place in Gothenburg in Sweden. In the world of MotoGP, world champion Valentino Rossi is trying to retain his crown on the previously uncompetitive Yamaha. His arch-rival, Spaniard Sete Gibernau, led the title on his Honda going into the Dutch TT at the historic Assen track. Showers in practice had left the track damp, but with more rain predicted, riders were forced to go flat out immediately, and Gibernau set the early pace. Sete later reflected on an unhappy practice session, saying that his clutch broke and that he wasn't able to open the throttle fully. With the track gradually drying and the threatened rain not appearing, the pole position time began to fall, and another Spaniard, Carlos Checa, looked to have pipped fellow Yamaha rider Rossi to the top spot. But in an intriguing game of cat and mouse, Rossi stormed back to produce the fastest ever practice time around the track and claimed top spot with less than 1 second of the session remaining.
The last lap was incredible. Put the qualification tire, and at the beginning of the lap I don't go at 100%. I don't go very fast, but after on the last 2 sections push very hard, and it's possible take a good advantage and make the pole position.
In the 250 class, Argentina's Sebastian Porto claimed pole position on his Aprilia. Porto recorded a time of 2 minutes 3.6 seconds to edge out Spaniard Daniel Pedrosa. His lap would have seen Porto in 21st place on the MotoGP grid, up against bikes with engines 4 times the size of his. Championship leader Randy Depunier was third fastest and Tony Elias completed the front row. In the 125 category, Australian Casey Stoner produced the fastest time to secure pole position on his KTM. Stoner qualified comfortably ahead of Spaniard Pablo Nieto on an Aprilia and Andrea Dovizioso on a Honda, with Steve Yenkner making up the front row. The MotoGP race was expected to develop into a battle between Gibernau and Rossi. But Brazilian Works Honda rider Alex Barros, making his 200th start in a Grand Prix, got amongst the pair of them and even took the lead on lap 11. But it was short-lived, as his gearbox backshifter malfunctioned, went back to first gear and spat him off. Italy's Marco Melandri nearly joined him, but unlike Proton rider Curtis Roberts, scrambled through the gravel and continued his battle with the Honda of Max Biaggi for third place. Roman Max, celebrating his 33rd birthday, was struggling with a lap of grip. On the last lap, Rossi popped out of Gibernau's slipstream and snatched the lead. Sete fought back but broke his front mudguard on Rossi's rear tyre. Rossi's win was his third in a row and fourth this year. Melandri took a narrow third from Biaggi, both are former World 250 champions. Having pipped Gibernau almost within sight of the line, Rossi was almost apologetic after the race.
It was a fantastic race for everybody. I know now we said for sure he's a little bit angry, but we do a great race, I think.
The pair are tied at the top of the standings, but technically Rossi is the leader on the strength of more race wins in the season so far. The 250 race was dominated by Sebastian Porto, who led from pole position and pulled away from his rivals at the halfway stage. By finishing second, Pedrosa moved to within 1 point of Depunier, who finished fourth at Assen behind Elias. Porto closes the gap with his second win in 3 weeks. The 125cc event had an even closer finish than the MotoGP, with 17-year-old Spaniard Jorge Lorenzo climbing from fourth place on the last lap to take his first win of the season, following his third place at Le Mans. He led home Roberto Locatelli and Casey Stoner. Andrea Dovizioso was fourth at Assen and stays ahead in the championship, as Stoner inches up the order with consistent finishes and Lorenzo jumps to number 6. The Neerutteren Grand Prix was the second of 3 Belgian races on the Motocross World Championship. Close to the German and Dutch borders, Neerutteren is the home track for Stefan Everts and several other Belgian riders. Despite never having raced or practiced there in the past, Michael Pichon claimed his 8th pole position of the season. In both MX1 races, the Frenchman quickly found the best lines on the technical track. After the practice, Everts said that he would beat Pichon in the races, but in the first event, that didn't happen. Pichon won, with Brian Jorgensen of Denmark claiming second. Third was Suzuki rider Kevin Strabos, with Everts eventually finishing 6th. But the Belgian 7-times world champion gained his revenge in the second race. This time, Everts took the win for Yamaha just ahead of Pichon, with Steve Ramon of KTM, another Belgian, coming third. However, Pichon won the Grand Prix overall and claimed 25 World Championship points, thanks to his win in the first moto and second place in the other. Everts finished second overall for the day, thanks to his poor finish in race 1. Everts stays way ahead in the overall standings with 443 points in defence of his title. Pichon slips into second, 102 points behind, and just ahead of Josh Coppins. In the smaller MX2 category, New Zealand's Ben Townley won the earlier moto ahead of fellow KTM rider Tyler Rattray of South Africa, who rode with a shoulder injury. But race 2 went to Australian Andrew McFarlane on his Yamaha, backing up his convincing double win at the last round. He was forced out of the first race after colliding with Townley. Kawasaki rider Michael Maschio of France finished the runner-up, and Tyler finished 4th, giving him his first place overall for the MX2 class. Stephen Sword dropped from 2nd to 3rd after a disastrous day with no points, and McFarlane's good form is a threat too. The riders now move on to Sweden. Meanwhile, the Outdoor Trials World Championship moved to France for the 5th of 9 stages on the tour. Dougie Lamkin's 7 years of domination is under threat from Japanese rider Takahisa Fujinami, who had a run of 4 successive wins going into the event. Victory on the first day went to Spaniard Adam Raga, earning his win on the second lap when he overtook the early leader Lamkin, with Fujinami third. The same riders shared the top 3 places on Sunday, but in a different order as Fujinami stole a late victory. Raga was unable to match Lamkin and Fujinami on the second tour and had to settle for third. Lamkin, meanwhile, saw the win slip from his grasp when he lost a single mark in the penultimate section of the trial, putting his right foot down. This loss put the Montesa pair on the same marks, and immediately Lamkin knew that he would have to settle for second place, having recorded 2 less cleans than his Japanese teammate. For many, the natural terrain is the essence of real observed trials, where the conditions may change between riders and there is no obvious way through. In comparison, the artificial man-made obstacles commonly found in the indoor trials require different skills and suits some riding styles better. For example, Fujinami relies on lots of revs to get up and over obstacles. So another overall win for Fujinami. With 4 events remaining, he holds an 11-point advantage over Lamkin, with reigning indoor world champion Raga close behind. Despite a minor slip-up on Saturday, the 24-year-old is looking good for his first championship victory, after 5 successive years of having to settle for second place overall behind Lamkin. The 4-day Goodwood Festival of Speed took place at the stately home of the Earl of March and celebrated the centenary of Rolls-Royce, including John Lennon's psychedelic version, about which the factory refused to comment. Rolls-Royce-powered fighter planes, which helped win World War II, performed flypasts. The theme of the weekend was Young Chargers, Old Masters, and would see famous sons of famous fathers demonstrating some of the world's rarest, fastest and most desirable cars on the hill climb track. Patrick Depaille's Formula One Tyrrell was followed by one of Bob Tullius's Group 44 Racing Team E-Type Jaguars. Also out on the road was Sir Jackie Stewart's World Championship winning Tyrrell. Despite the weather, Canadian 1997 World Champion Jacques Villeneuve was able to drive his late father's Ferrari, in which Gilles scored his first Grand Prix win at home in Canada.
I've just been here to drive one of my dad's Ferraris, the T3, that's the 1978 car with which he won Montreal.
From 25,000 visitors at the 1993 event, attendance at the festival has grown to over 160,000 this year.
It's great. This event is made for the people, for everyone to look at cars that have made many dreams, and you just go back through the dreams here, seeing all these old cars.
Adrian Newey, technical director for the McLaren Formula One team, drove a Ford GT40 from his personal collection. In many cases, the cars are simply unique, the only one of their kind in the world. 10 years after his death, Ayrton Senna's Lotus was driven up the famous hill. Sir Stirling Moss, probably the best driver never to be world champion, needed a lift back to the pits. After just 10 years, Goodwood has become one of the world's premier vehicle enthusiast events. It's a must-see occasion. But no matter whether you're bouncing in Belgium, track testing the tyre wall, or just scrabbling for grip, so you stay on track and up to speed, make sure you catch next week's Drive.